Are you tired of your grids looking like this? Do you wish you could make your own setups without having to ask help from GBFI every time? Oh, you're in the right place. Hi everyone, my name is Vasky. I've been playing GBF for about 5 years now, and I have done basically everything there is to do in this game. In this multi-part series, I'll be teaching you everything you need to know about team building in Granblue Fantasy. This is the Granblue Academy. Welcome all to your first class in the Granblue Academy's Grid and Team Building course. Now before we begin, this is an intermediate level course. It assumes you've at least done the Knick-Knack Academy and you've unlocked Magna 3. I won't be answering basic stuff such as what is Grid. So if you don't have the required knowledge, please do bookmark the video and then come back at a later date when you're ready to go. In today's lesson, we'll be laying out the fundamentals for team and grid building. Now, if you ever played an RPG before, if you ever played a good RPG before, you know the game begins by introducing its concepts bit by bit as you go through the game, so that by the time you get to the end, you've known everything and you've had time to familiarize yourself with each bit of the game. Unfortunately, this one doesn't really do that. So because of this, it ends up being my job to teach you the basics the game doesn't bother to. Now, if you're watching this, I'm going to assume you have some interest in getting better at the game and getting better at team building, and because of that, we're going to have to unlearn some of the habits the game inadvertently teaches you via its design. We'll begin by learning how to establish actionable goals. Then, we'll learn about how to read character and weapon kits, and wrap it up by establishing a basic flowchart for building your own team. Also, stick around till the end to learn about 3 huge newbie mistakes in GBF, and what to do instead. Now, just a few moments ago, I didn't riff on Pokemon for no reason. Have you ever played a mainline Pokemon game? Like, any of them? If you have, chances are your entire playthrough revolved around one team that you build up throughout the game, swapping party members in and out as you caught new ones. At no point does a standard Pokemon game ask you to completely rethink your party to handle a specific encounter. Now, this is obviously not the only way to play a Pokemon game, but it is the way the game encourages you to play it via its narratives and mechanics. Because of this, I'm going to label Pokemon as a one-party game. Conversely, games in the Shin Megami Tensei series actively ask you to rethink your team based on what's coming up. You are expected to fail a fight, learn the enemy, and then come back with something crafted to counter that. Instead of refining one team throughout the experience, you curate different ones for each encounter. Because of this, we can call games in the Shin Megami Tensei series multiple party games. Now, let's say we are to make a spectrum with Pokemon on one end and Shin Megami Tensei on the other end, just for the sake of simplicity, where one end is multiple party and the other end is single party. Where do you think Granblue Fantasy fits on this line? Here? Here? No, what about here? I don't think there is one answer to this problem. You see, GBF, despite being a gacha, is actually closer to an older MMO such as Final Fantasy XI. There isn't really one win condition, there isn't one story you beat to win the game. Depending on how you play the game, what you consider to be victory will depend on your personal goals. If we put aside the obvious issue of there being 6 elements, and as such, needing at least 6 teams, there are a lot of players who do like to play GBF as a one-party game. Just one team per element. But if you're watching this, I assume you want to get better at the game. I assume you want to make better and stronger teams. And when we look at it through this lens, I think the answer is immediately clear. By virtue of there being so much content in the game, GBF is a multiple party game. If you were to take one piece of advice from this video, let it be the following. Make each team with a specific goal in mind. At no point should you ever say something like, this is my water team. No, you should focus on what your team is trying to do. Is it a team for quick Guild War EX Plus? Well, your goal was 35 million damage as fast as possible, at least at the time of recording. Are you doing full auto Ultimate Bahamut? Well, your goal is to kill it as fast as possible, while obviously not dying to it. Are you learning Hexachromatic Hierarch? Your goal is to clear all the raid mechanics and do enough damage to land a kill. So on and so forth. Your goal tells you what type of characters you want, and you want to build towards that. Yeah, I know, you're not here to watch me riff on about game design. How do we actually know what characters we want to use? Well, I can begin by telling you what not to do. Listen, I know it's not a hot take to dunk on the tier lists, but god, these things just aren't that useful. Remember, we're trying to solve different goals here. There is no information we can glean from, this character is actually an SS in Burst, and this one is only an S. Doesn't tell us anything besides the opinion of some writer at GameWit. What even is Burst anyway? For what it's worth, I don't envy the people who have to write these. Like, they have to take all the nuances of a character and then assimilate them into 3 rankings. The fact we even have something that's like barely usable is an achievement on its own. Most of the time. No. If we want to make good teams, we need a mental model of our characters' kits. So we want to think of each character as a set of inputs and outputs. What the character wants and what the character gives. Let's look at a very ubiquitous example here. Grand Percival. He's one of the best units in the game. I think we can all agree on this. Everyone knows him, everyone memes him. So what does he want and what does he give? Well, to start off with, every character has some way to do damage. Looking at his first skill, he's inflicting some debuffs, including Singed, and he also wants Singed to rise to increase the output. We can add those too. I'm going to gloss over the second skill here for the sake of time, but we can also add it if we wanted it. Let's skip on to the third skill. This thing is a menace. It gives you fire attack, it gives you bonus damage, and you take a whole extra turn without taking a turn? Well, you can't charge attack with it, so we can actually abbreviate it a bit and package it as normal attack buffs. And that is about what we can glean just by reading the kit. Now the next part is going to take a little bit more intuition and curiosity. Here's an expanded damage log of one of my teams using Percival. By looking at the numbers, we can tell Percival deals roughly 2/3 normal attack damage and 1/3 skill damage, at least on my team. By knowing how the character does damage, we can then figure out how the character wants to be buffed. Percival here is doing most to normal attack damage and a fair bit of skill damage, so we can very quickly say he wants both. Now do take note of how I listed short fights under the normal attack buffs. When evaluating a character kit, it is important to take note of what each part of the kit is good for. Look for huge buffs that don't last long, the ability to output a lot of damage over a long fight, parts of the kit that don't need any button presses, or anything else you think is applicable to a specific niche. Keen-eyed viewers might have noticed something important missing here. What about the charge attack damage? Does he want to charge attack? How do we know that? Instinctively by reading the kit? Maybe? On a longer fight you'll want to seal with him eventually to regain King's Blaze, but on a shorter fight, probably not. His passives indicate he wants to normal attack more than anything. But does that mean we want to add CA buffs to the inputs? What about only for long fights, and how much does he want them compared to NA and skill? I'm going to leave those questions as an exercise to the viewer. But those are the questions you should be asking yourself when trying out a character and trying to figure out their usage. Do you think a charge attack Percival could work? Well, try it out in a trial, see how it performs, and then add it to your mental map. The reason we're doing all of this is because we want to create a toolkit to accomplish our goals. If we know what each character wants and gives, and what each character does, we can much more efficiently pair them up together, and we can create cohesive teams. If we pick characters that want and give similar things, we can make them all buff each other to create a team that's much more than the sum of its parts. Also, if our characters are all in sync on what they want to receive, it becomes a lot easier to build a grid for them. We just have to fill it with those things.
やるな。
There's an elephant in the room here, and that's the fact we are playing a gacha game, and because of that, power creep exists. Characters are not exactly designed to be balanced, and sometimes even if a character on paper looks perfectly synergistic, they might just be undertuned. It is important you keep that in mind when making your choices. But here, check something out. Grand Cosmos, right? She's a must-have for every light player, one of the best characters in the element. But can you believe when she came out, we thought she was bad. If you look at it in the context of all the raids and characters that we have today, you might reach the conclusion that we were insane back then. But if you go back and examine the playing field at the time, this becomes a lot more reasonable. For one, none of the characters issue paired with Cosmos today existed back then. None of these were out. Secondly, there just wasn't any place in the game that actively asked for Cosmos. The hardest raid at the time was Super Ultimate Bahamut, and that was solved already. And below that, all you had was Agastya, and this was before we had Mark II Revanche weapons. So no one cared about Agastya, it was a dead raid. So we have a character that on paper is extremely powerful, but lacked both support for what she wants and reasons to use what she gives. So I think Cosmos is a very interesting case study. The lesson to be taken here is that a character's usability is not only defined by its raw power level, but also by how much we can buff it and how much the current context of the game values the things it outputs. We are looking at this in the context of the entire game, but you can also look at this in the context of your own setups. You could just go on a tier list and see what's rated highly. For example, GameWit really likes Formal Ilsa. But does this really mean anything for us if we don't have the characters that synergize with her? Conversely, you can see Summer Fedial is all the way down here, and I use her fairly regularly for a high-end setup. Does this mean the tier list is entirely useless? Not really, no. In fact, I have a really good suggestion on how you can make a good use of it. You want to go onto the wiki and hop on the collection tracker. You can fill this with the characters and summons you currently have. If you then go on a tier list page, you can filter by the ones you have or the ones you don't have. This way, you can get a very decent bird's eye view of what characters are considered good. This is especially useful if you have been playing for a long time and have a huge backlog of characters. Just don't get blinded by the ratings, and remember to actually check what the character does and whether that's good for you or not. Oh, here's another cool trick. Do you need a character that does something specific? Well, start by finding a character or weapon that can do that already. For example, let's say I need more charge bar gain. I know the Unsigned Kaneshige does that, so let's go to that page on the wiki. We can then click the link on the buff and get taken to a page with every source to that effect. If you need a more granular search, you can also try GBFAS at gbfas.io. Here, you can pick a set of tags to search for, and find what characters, classes, or weapons can provide that. At the end of the day, GBF might as well be a puzzle game, and each player has different tools. The first step to solving the puzzles is to know what tools you have. Study your characters, try them out, and then gain some intuition for what they're good at. This next section is going to serve as a high-level intro to figuring out what you want in your grid. Over the next few episodes, we're going to be going into more detail over what each weapon does, but for now, I'm just going to give you the rough idea and the mindset you should have. The biggest issue with building a grid is that the amount of slots you have access to is limited. Since the main constraint here is space, we want to get the most possible mileage from each of our slots. On the last section, we established a model for reading character kits. The fun thing about this model is that you can also use it for weapons. Here, check this out. Celeste Sabre Ater. You probably have a few of these, right? What does it want? It's an Omega weapon, so it's going to want the respective Omega boost. What does it give? It gives skill specs, and it gives some critical hit rates. We can also go one step further and derive that since the weapon gives critical chance, you probably want more weapons with critical chance to get that up to 100%. If our question is, do we want to use the weapon in our grid? Well, the answer is, do we have any characters that want these things? Let's assume a perfect world where all 4 of the characters in our team, including the MC, deal exclusively charge attack damage. Well, in this world, it's really easy to build a grid, isn't it? You just put all the CA weapons in it. Unfortunately, reality is not that simple. Most characters tend to want at least 2 types of damage. So, with that in mind, you are going to have to split your grid space between all the various needs. How much do you give each? Usually, you prefer to focus on up to 2 damage types at most. For example, if you're using Hesselia, you'll want either CA and skill or NA and skill, rather than trying to fit all 3. CA and NA in particular are often at odds with each other, as skill damage tends to be common to both playstyles. If you're doing a high difficulty raid, you may be asked to alternate between NA and CA because of all the mechanics the raid has. For example, Hexachromatic Hierarch has a CA 5x omen and a TA 4x omen. In situations like this, you have no choice but to dilute your grid to support both playstyles. However, if you are not forced to do this, it is often better to try and stick to as few damage types as possible to ensure that you can buff them properly. Let's organize this into something that makes sense. Before we even begin making our team and grid, we should know the following. 1. What we want to do, and 2. What our tools are. Let's start with the goal. As of recording, the next Unite and Fight is Earth Advantage. This means we need a setup for EX+. Let's start by establishing the goal. 35 million damage, as few button presses as possible, and as little lockout as possible. If you don't know, lockout is a little waiting widget in the corner. Whenever you do anything in the game, you get a lockout. Everything gives lockout. But charge attacks give a lot more lockout, and as such, we want to minimize the amount of charge attacks we do, so that we don't get stuck waiting between fights. This is pretty easy on my fairly complete endgame account, so we'll be using my friend Sia's inventory, and we'll be cooking with that instead. So here's what we have to work with. Eucatafolia's skill 1 gives a lot of normal attack burst damage, and it also gives us 100% triple attack. The 000 summon is at 4-star, so we can try doing a 2 CA burst with the Agastya Simulacrum or Pinch Harmonics. Sia also has Bicep, who can enable a 0-button CA burst with Huang Long or equivalent to Feed Bar. We might even be able to combine it with the previous idea. All 3 of these ideas can probably work, but let's try to keep lockout in mind, and let's try to go for the best one first. And I think, by virtue of not having any charge attacks, Eucatafolia is our best possible option here. What we're looking for now shifts a bit. Folia gives a massive damage buff to normal attacks, so we want characters that can synergize with that. Specifically, ones that can do so without any skill presses. Our objective is maximizing NA damage with no skill presses, so I'm going to pick Necromancer as the MC class for the first passive. Going back to the inventory, there's a few strong picks here. Trio, Sabrina, and Pengi are all strong damage dealers with a skill hit after attack. Halloween Dante gives us bonus damage on triple attack. Folia already gives us full triple attack, so this will always be active. I'm going to choose Sabrina because she has a bonus damage passive alongside the skill hit. Dante, he buffs everyone else and isn't only just strong by himself, so we're gonna take him for additional synergy. I'll be going into more detail on the grids in the next 2 episodes, but for now, all you need to know is that Folio 1 requests a lot of raw damage. I'm thinking what we can do here is make use of Kaim's passive from the back row, and then just fill the grid with a bunch of weapons that give us raw damage. We don't care about HP, or triple attack rate, or anything of the sort, so we're just gonna go for max juice and fill the grid like this. Again, more info on this in the next 2 episodes. And there you have it. A pretty decent EX Plus setup for Sia. If she didn't have Folia, or the setup didn't work, I would have tried 000 instead. If that didn't work, I would have tried Bisa instead, and if that didn't work, I would have gone back to the inventory and tried to find something that worked with a few more button presses. Let's wrap it up. We can summarize the team building process as follows. You want to start with your goal, then, knowing what your characters are good at doing, you want to pick the ones that match what you want to do. From here, your characters influence other characters. Try to build both for your team synergy and for your desired goal. Then, your goal and your characters will determine what weapons you want in your grid. And very importantly, test your setup out. If it works, awesome. If it's not quite there yet, refine it as needed until you're satisfied. That last point in particular, by the way, extremely important. GBF is a capital C complicated game, and we don't have supercomputers in our brains to just instantly process everything. You have to test your setup, test it, retest it, until you end up with something good. That is the only way. As promised, by the engagement bait at the start of the video, here's 3 common mistakes I often see newbies make that completely undercut their ability to progress in the game. Number 1, measuring by turn count. The first big mistake here is to try to optimize by killing in the lowest amount of turns possible. If you have to kill a boss 100 times, for example, and your 5 turn setup with lots of buttons and charge attacks takes 6 minutes, that's 10 hours. If an 8 turn setup that's leaner takes 4 minutes instead, that's closer to 7 despite being more turns. Number 2, padding your defense. Try and pad defense and HP as little as possible. The only point of HP that matters is the last. You don't need more HP than the boss deals in damage. You want to focus on damage instead and try and kill as fast as possible, so you can get your drops as fast as possible. Your comfy, safe full auto is probably holding you back. Number 3, asking the wrong questions. This section is about asking overly generic questions. Questions like, is this character good? Let's look back at some of the examples I gave earlier, about how Cosmos was thought to be bad on release, or how formal Ilsa isn't great without the rest of the team to synergize. If you ask an open-ended question like, is this character good? The answer you are likely to receive is either going to be true but misleading, or just not useful at all. Like if you ask someone, is this character good? And they tell you, yes. What are you going to do with that? Other examples of this include overgeneralizing types of content. For example, if you get a character and ask, is this good for burst? Same problem. What type of burst? EX plus? That's 35 million. Super Ultimate Bahamut Execute? That's 300 million. The characters that are good for one might not be good for the other. Instead, you should try asking more pointed and specific questions, both to yourself and to your peers. Ask things to yourself like, where do I think I would use this? What does this provide? What does this want? That type of stuff is a lot more useful than, is this good? Or is this good in burst? Because if you do those types of questions, then you are building up your mental library of where you might think each character would be useful and how you want to use them. And by doing this, you are building your own toolkit for solving the problems the game throws at you. And that concludes our first lesson. I hope what I said here has been useful to you, and it has helped you gain some basic insights on team building. Here, I'll even give you some homework. You want to hop on the advanced grids page on the GBF wiki and just pick out some setups you like. Then, I want you to reverse engineer the character choices. Read the character's kits and try to map how they tie together and what they bring to the setup. We have this huge repository of example setups, so you should be making good use of it to level up your skills and to understand what's good at what. Over the next few episodes, we'll be going over how to build a grid, what each weapon does, and how to recognize what goes with what. So, if you're interested in that, please do consider subscribing. Oh, and also, this is my first time doing scripted and edited content, so please do leave me a comment letting me know what you liked and what you think I can do better. I would really appreciate it. Okay, I think that's all I have for you today. I'll see you in the next episode, and as always, have fun.